So, post banlist, Sky Striker's looking to be the best it's been in a long time, but is it going to be tier 1? Well, let's talk about it. Today I'm going to be showing off my blind second Sky Striker list. We'll talk about all the things that make it so powerful, and of course some of the flaws along the way. But of course, before we hop into what makes this deck so great, please go grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Let's do this. Alright, so like I said, this deck is looking a lot stronger going into this format. Not only do we have 2 engage to increase the consistency and versatility of this deck, but of course now with 3 multi-roll, even though you won't be playing 3, it makes it to where now you have a card that makes it to where your opponent can't touch their cards when you start activating spells, which of course has always been a powerful thing. But without wasting any more time, hopping into the monsters, of course, we're going to be starting off with 3 copies of Ray, because she's bae. Of course, nothing's really changed. You're going to max out on this. She's just the heart and soul of the deck. And after that, of course, we're also playing the 1 copy of Rose. I really don't feel like you need 2 of this unless you were going first, which, again, is a completely different build than this. When you go second, you have so many ways to get to Ray, or really to get to your engine, so I really feel like having Rose in multiples doesn't make that much sense. Really, Sky Striker's a fair deck, so by going second, you can kind of pick apart your opponent's board, and then kind of reestablish your board to set up enough interruptions to prevent the clapback after. Again, you could build this to go first, but you'd probably have to include some kind of floodgate, be it there could be only 1 or something of that nature. But after the Rose, one of my favorite monsters in this deck is actually the 1 copy of Hamp. This is just an in-archetype kaiju that is searchable, and as long as you have one of your monsters on the field, you can summon it for free. Also, don't forget, you can put it on your side of the field as well, which does come up from time to time. When it's destroyed by battle, you can destroy a card on the field, so there are some times that you can set up ways to out anti-spell with this as well, so that's just something to keep in mind. One of the biggest flaws of this deck is dealing with monsters that can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects, so by having an in-archetype way to search a removal card that will out those kind of monsters really adds a layer to this deck that is really appreciated. Oh, and also in the Pearly matchup, now that you have Hamp, it basically makes it to where Engage outs Noir or just forces all the materials all at once off of it, so it's pretty dang good to have this in the deck. Now, like I said, kaijus are pretty good for this deck. It definitely solves a lot of problems in the format, whether it's Dragoons in the branded matchup or the Lady in the Labyrinth matchup as well. So for that reason, I'm also opting to main 1 copy of Gamma Seal. I could definitely see myself bumping this up to 2, but the fact that I have 1 that's searchable in deck, I feel like 1 is at least good enough. But in the place of the second Gamma Seal, I'm actually opting to run 1 Pankratops. This card's obviously really great at going second and solves a lot of problems this deck can deal with. Again, it doesn't solve the problem with monsters that can't be targeted, but it does help us with outing back row or multiple monsters that are on the field all in 1 card. Plus, post side, when you run into anti-spell, this is just another card that you already had in your main deck to help you out that card. And then after that, I'm just opting to run a couple of hand traps. Right now, I'm playing 3 copies of Ash Blossom, just being generically good right now. And then, of course, really helping you in your worst matchups, being Branded and Labyrinth. And then after that, I'm just playing 3 copies of Imperm, just generically good. Plus, it doesn't trigger the triple tactics cards. So I definitely think this is really good going forward. Plus, it's a Chalice when you go second, kind of like your Widow Anchor, which is definitely appreciated. Another matchup that's a little awkward is Kashtira, so having Imperm is just another way to turn off that Macrocosma, so it helps for that as well. But another hand trap that I've been considering in the main deck is Ghost Bell. There's a lot of matchups that it can be a little awkward in, but there are so many decks that this deck struggles with that actually Ghost Bell helps with. It helps against Branded, it stops the welcome trap cards. There are so many different things that it could apply to, but for right now I'm siding it because normally post side people are also putting in Bestials, and it helps with that as well. But after that, now we're going to hop onto the spells. Now, starting off with the best spell in your deck, especially because we're going second, it's 3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. I really suggest that anybody trying to play this deck really considers picking up this card. It adds so much consistency and versatility to the deck, plus since we blind second, it's very easy to meet the requirements to activate it. Not only does it get you engine by getting you engaged, but it can search any of the tech cards that you decide to main depending on what the format looks like. Plus, post side, it can really dig into those other sideboard cards as well. So for that reason, reason I really feel like this card is a must. But again, test it out yourself. I really don't see a world where I'm not playing at least 3 in this deck. Now, hopping into the Sky Striker spells, of course, we're going to be playing the 2 Engage, and I'm only playing 2 copies of Multi-Roll. There's actually an argument to only play 1 of this card, because really you don't want to draw multiples of this when you're trying to go second. But if you're able to resolve this card going second, it makes it to where now all your spell cards are insane, essentially super polys. But then after that, a bunch of standard stuff. We're playing 2 copies of the Afterburners, because again, we're going second. 3 copies of Widow Anchor, and I'm also playing 3 copies of Linkage. I think this is all very standard. I know some people will play 1 of the Afterburners, but I am playing Pot of Desires, so a little spoiler. And also, it's just the best card going second in this deck. It's super versatile. Also, one quick note, Linkage sets up some really cool technical plays in this deck, not only acting like a starter, making it to where, again, you don't need more roses, but being able to send spells to the grave to make it to where you have 3 very easily, and of course, dodge cards as well. Really sets up a lot of utility while also setting up OTKs. I think the card's one of my favorite cards. But then after that, we just have a couple of 1-ofs. We have the 1 Shark Cannon, the 1 Hornet Drones, and I'm only opting to play 1 copy of the field spell. I think this is all pretty standard. I really want to play 2 of the Shark Cannon. It definitely helps in some of your worst matchups, especially branded. But again, there are so many matchups that it's really average in. So for that reason, at least game 1, I'm opting to only main deck 1. And as for Area 0, I'm only playing 1 because just like Multi-Roll, I really don't want to draw multiples, but it's just not as strong as Multi-Roll, so again, I think 1 is good enough. But now moving on to some of the utility cards that I'm opting to play. First, of course, being the 1 copy of Terraforming, which basically gives us 2 copies of Area 0 while also giving us an additional spell. We got the 1 Rhoda, giving us more Rays or Roses. We got the 1 Upstart for consistency, and again, more spells. And then I'm opting to run 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talents. Again, just a card that's very easy to make live and so impactful in this deck. You have so many ways to draw cards in this deck, so I don't think you need to have 3, especially with Thrust being able to search it out as well. This card is so versatile, and it does help us with the non-targetable monsters, so for that reason, I definitely think you should be playing at least 2 in this deck. Now, speaking of drawing cards, I am opting to play 2 copies of Pot of Desires, which I mentioned earlier. It's very easy for Sky Striker to pull 1 copy of Engage out of the deck, so if you're worried about banishing both, you don't have to worry about that. Like I said, this deck can be fair, so you want as many cards to play as possible, especially because you know you're going to be confronting some kind of board. And now moving on to the last 2 cards in the deck. At one time, I was playing 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet because, again, it does solve the problem with those non-targetable monsters. But this deck is very fair, so I just wanted high-impact cards, and I'm opting to play the 2 copies of Lightning Storm. This card can definitely be a blowout in the right matchup, but really this has an application against a lot of decks in the format. Against Kashtira, you'd think it'd be bad because normally their monsters are in defense, but being able to hit their back row, get rid of their field spell, and of course, get rid of Birth is so important for your deck. Plus, also in the branded matchup, monsters float, and a lot of them do end up in defense, and of course, Mirror Jade really just has his graveyard effect if you destroy it, but being able to get rid of Lost off the field and force them to activate red early before you even put cards on the field really helps you when trying to break the board, just forcing them to activate everything preemptively. That also goes with the Labyrinth matchup. While a lot of the cards are going to be chainable and they can just summon their monsters with their welcomes, now at least you know they won't have set cards on the field, so you can start targeting them with your card effects, which is going to be very important for your deck. If they have access to the furniture cards, then on resolution, they can start using them to start setting more cards to protect their lady. But just with 1 card, you now forced out most of their interaction, and really now all you have to deal with is a monster that can't be targeted. So pretty dang good. There's a bunch of other options that we could consider, but for right now, this has been testing pretty dang good. But before we move on to the extra deck, if you're looking to help the channel grow, make sure you like the video, make sure you're subscribed, comment down below. But also, if you're looking to do a little bit more, make sure you click the link down below in the description to Next Level Anime. They're the guys that make the gear I wear now and what I wear at events, so if you're looking to pick up some great anime gear at a really affordable price, make sure you guys go check them out. Plus, if you use my code Cards&CoffeeTCG, not only will you save an additional 10%, putting money in your pocket, but a portion of that proceed goes back to the channel, helping me make content for you. Now, hopping onto the extra deck, there's obviously going to be some really standard stuff, but there's a couple of slots that I've been testing out, and I still haven't figured out what I like best. For the Sky Striker stuff, of course, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Kagari, being able to recycle your spells from the grave, really setting up that Engage, Outing, Noir combo I talked about earlier. Then after that, we have 3 Shizuku. You could play 2 because we are going second, but I just think having the names in deck is very important. We only have 2 Hayate. Again, you could play 3, but we're going second, so I don't find myself needing to go into this that often, especially once you're established. You really never need this card except for being a name. And then after that, I'm opting to run 2 copies of Zeke. I think this is very important, not only because we're going second, but we have so many cards to steal our opponent's monsters, so being able to have this name in your extra deck at most times is very important for clearing your board so you can start using the spells again. Zeke by far is one of my favorite extra deck monsters for this deck, not only being able to banish your opponent's monsters, but also bump up your monsters by 1,000 attack, really setting up some cool OTKs. But then for the last striker, the one kinda, you gotta play it. It's a name, and it saves you from dying when your opponent's trying to kill your board. But really, in my eyes, this is all very standard. But some of the other links that I'm opting to play, first is the 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. There are going to be floodgates running around in this diverse meta, so I really want to make sure I have access to some kind of removal in my extra deck. This normally only comes up post-side to deal with something like Anti-Spell, but again, in that Kashtira matchup, being able to hit something like the Birth is going to be very important because we really don't want our spells getting banished for free. But now, after the Phoenix, I'm opting to run 1 of the Dark Charmer. Obviously, this is really good in the mirror match, being able to take your opponent's raise, but post-side, since a lot of people will be siding Bystials, it's nice to be able to at least take the Magnamoot out of their grave and then search a 1-up Druid's Worm that you might consider siding. But now for the last Link monster in the extra deck, I'm actually running it back to an old school tech, 1 of the Ningirsu. This card, again, non-targeting removal, a little hard to set up because it takes 2 links, but again, it does help us out those Dragoons, it helps us out those ladies. This card is very good for spot removal, and again, it also has synergy by sending some of your other cards that are on the field to the graveyard. I'm still experimenting with this card, so I can't tell you right now if it's going to stay, but I've been really enjoying it in the matchups that I struggle with, so definitely test it out yourself. I think it's a solid option going into this format. But then for the last monster in the extra deck, of course, 1 copy of Zeus. This card's a powerhouse. We don't play Exceeds, but we have so many ways to steal our opponent's monsters. So whether it's taking a Rise Heart or any Exceed to set up the Zeus play, wipe the board, and then use the field spell to trigger Ray, or maybe use a multi-roll to send that Zeus, that way you can start comboing off. This card definitely adds a lot of power and versatility to your toolbox, so I definitely think it should be included. So that's it for the extra deck, and of course we're playing the 1 token. You gotta play the Ace token. But that's gonna wrap things up for today's deck profile. I really feel like this deck has a lot of really good matchups, but the fact that Branded and Labyrinth look to be so popular in the meta right now, and they happen to be this deck's worst matchups, really makes it to where this deck is in an awkward spot. But I feel like with the correct tech cards and the correct board breakers and the correct strategy, there's no reason this deck cannot top these regionals or YCSs, and I would not be shocked if you see them in the upcoming nationals as well. But once again, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving this channel, and here's hoping to see you on the next video. Peace.